Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am delighted with our guest today. We are truly going to hear some wonderful wisdom and some real life practicality on how we can deal with this COVID situation, being able to not just endure it, white knuckle it, but being able to learn from it, to get our hands into it and move forward from it. So today we have Debra McClendon. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And if you're not aware of wonderful Debra McClendon, let me give you her official background, and then I'm going to share a little bit of a personal insight with her. But she is a clinical psychologist in marriage and family therapy, and she helps those who particularly deal with anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, and also with just a full range of mental and emotional wellness issues that we all deal with. She has published articles on those same subjects, and she's also co-authored book chapters and articles, as well as has released a book with her husband, Richard J. McClendon, and it's called Commitment to the Covenant, Strengthening the Me, We, and Thee of Marriage. And she has previously taught as an adjunct faculty member at both Brigham Young University and Utah Valley University. And I'm so happy to have her here to give us the 411 on how we can get through this experience in a positive way, not a Pollyanna, but in a way that we can evaluate what is this doing for us, and this make the purpose come to the surface for us, because I don't believe in any way, shape, or form this is just a random act. I feel like there's so much that we each can glean from this experience. So take us through this, kind of walk us through this vision, this lens of how we can see this COVID living and this quarantine through a more productive, proactive, positive lens.
One of the things that I've really thought about in these recent events, and also some circumstances in my own life, is the idea, the word that has come to my mind has been the word distill. So to give you a definition, if you're looking at liquids, when we distill a liquid, we're purifying it by vaporizing it and then condensing it. If we're looking at something such as in our own lives, to distill something is to extract the essential meaning or the most important elements. And I've really been on a journey the last few years of my life, not just with COVID-19 in the last couple of months, with this very process. God's work is to sanctify our souls. And so he gives us opportunities to tutor us. I've been reading a lot of Neil A. Maxwell books lately, and he uses throughout his books words such as divine tutoring, schooling, soul stretching. And these types of experiences are opportunities for us to grow. And in my journey, it's been about distilling down to the most essential elements and letting certain things go. And maybe I'm letting those things go, not permanently, but maybe I'm taking and hitting the pause button on something and saying, I can't do that one right now. I'll get back to that. So in 2017, early September, my community, which interestingly is your community, so we share this event, we were evacuated from our homes due to the Pole Creek and Bald Mountain fires here in Utah County. And we were evacuated for 9 days. And it was a very, very interesting experience. If you've never had to do this, it was so impactful. The experience of having a couple of hours notice to say, walk through your house, take whatever you deem as important, and you may never see any of the rest of it again. And you have to be willing to shove it in your car, walk away and say, I'm okay. I can walk away from this. And it becomes very clear in that moment really what's important and what's not. I grabbed our photo albums, I grabbed journals, I did grab clothing because I realized I have a family of 7 and it would be a lot of work to try to go shop for 7 of us on this for the moment. But you know what? The house furnishings, the piano, the decor, it can all be replaced. And I really came to realize what was truly important and what wasn't.
Oh, you are so right. And you know what's beautiful about that? If for our listeners, if you've had an experience like that in your life, that it very quickly shows you what you thought was important and what actually is important. And the irony, there were things that I did not realize that I really did value that I just had to go on the fly and grab. And it was interesting, my kids, their biggest lament, we had just been searching for a kitchen table for kind of restructuring our family after going through a difficult time. And the kitchen table is a hub for us. And we had just all gotten the buy-in and found a kitchen table we loved. And we had just gotten it in, and we had only used it for a couple of weeks. And that was the biggest thing. They were like, is there any way we can put this on top of the car? That was so important to them.
Yeah.
But those things that reflected what you truly valued and what was so meaningful actually.
Exactly.
So
And it's not actually silly about the table, because what did that table represent for you and your kids?
Exactly. Our connection, our memories, that's where we banter and we get through discussion and we have meals and we're slinging stuff at each other and laughing. And that's exactly it. It's that shared experience and that connection, that bond. So you're exactly right. When those experiences come, they bring us down to the nub.
Exactly. And then in that same time period, I began to really struggle with my health in a lot of ways, and started to, although I'd had health issues previous, they had never really impacted my ability to function with my family or my professional interests very much. And at this time, I started to experience this pull of having to make decisions about how much could I do, right? I love what I do for a living. I love being a psychologist. It's been a very meaningful, fulfilling career. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And yet I found that I was getting to the point where I was feeling burdened. I could not fulfill all the commitments I'd made in a way that worked for me. And so I started to reduce my commitments, which was very painful. I came into this career to be helpful to people. So of course I want to say yes to everybody and help everybody, but I couldn't. And I have had to learn to put a pause on. I have created presentations, because I love to teach, that I have never given yet, because I created them and then said, I can't pursue this right now. And so we have to make these kind of decisions of what is the most important thing. And I found with my health issues, what's the most important thing for me is to try to get healthy in my own body so that I could feel like I had a good quality of life, and to try to have good relationships with my kids and my husband. And everything else has had to take a back burner. I still do some professional things, as you and I are visiting today, but it's on a much more reduced scale at this time. And I look forward to a future where I can do more than I am. So that takes us to...
Yeah, so it sounds to me like what you're saying is, and I think this is a big thing for what women are dealing with right now, is okay, I can see that we've had to pull back and things have been taken away from me that are out of my control. And with your health issues, that's that same thing. You're going along, and then bam, you're hitting this roadblock, right? And yet in the roadblock, just with the same fire principle that we were talking about, it is an opportunity to reassess. It's not that you have to give up completely what you're doing, but it sounds like what you're doing is a different approach to that. And
Yes.
You're doing Zoom, and you're maybe being choosier about what you would actually take on. And in the same way for our listeners, this COVID living, I think, is such a gift that way, because we can reassess when we come back or when we come out of this experience. And maybe there'll be a wave and another wave, but it won't be exactly like this wave. So what are we going to get from this wave? Even when we're talking about the fire, I remember, and I don't know if you experienced this, but when we came back from the fire, my first thought was we were driving up the hills. I want to get everything in and set and cleaned out and just back to normal as soon as possible. But when we walked in the house, it was almost ghost-like, because everything was left the day we left. And so it was in that disarray, that moment in time. And I just had this thought of, I don't want to go back to the way that it was. Right. I want it to be different. So I do think it's important for us to consider, how do we want this to be different? How do we want to come out of this and make this a new experience, like with you and your health, doing it differently, but still doing the things you love?
Yes. And I think one other piece I want to add to that, as I talk about the move into COVID for me, is as we talk about distilling down to the most important elements, is now I want to add this piece of being flexible and resilient. So I have 5 children, and the last 3 are each a year apart. So it has been a tremendous challenge. And I have longed and just gritted my teeth until I could get all 3 of them in school full time. So my 6-year-old at the time, last fall, went into 1st grade, and I was like, yay, right? Like, they're all in school and I could do more professional things and such. And I got used to having my time while the kids were at school to do what I needed to do for my health, for my profession. My health started to go downhill, so I was making those adjustments, but I had plenty of time to balance everything. And I had just gotten into a lifestyle where I felt balanced. I didn't feel overwhelmed with my professional commitments. I was managing my health as best I could. And then I could be a decent mom in the afternoons because I felt like I'd had the time and space to do what I needed to. Now we fast forward, she turns 7, we're coming on to the end of the school year, and boom, COVID-19, all 5 children are now home, right in the middle of where my health was in a transition, and I was not doing well. And the first week or two they were home, as many of you parents experienced, just trying to figure out how to use the websites the teachers were asking you to use and everything. I was literally on the verge of panic attacks because I was so sick and I did not know these programs they were asking me to use, and my kids were young enough, the 3 younger ones couldn't be independent. So it's been a very big challenge to have them here because I said, now I don't have the time to take care of my health and my professional commitments. The children have lopsided it all. So in addition to finding those elements that are most important, we have to be flexible. And when things come in, we have to relook at things and say, okay, maybe the commitments that I had balanced, they need to be put off even further right now because now I'm teacher and mom. I'm teacher and mom.
And house cleaner. And yeah.
Right. So in the Book of Mormon begins with a story about a prophet named Lehi and his family, and they travel into the wilderness. And I'm struck simply by a verse right at the beginning of the book in the 2nd chapter, 1 Nephi chapter 2, verse 4. And it came to pass that he departed into the wilderness, and he left his house, like we did with our fires, and the land of his inheritance, and his gold, and his silver, and his precious things, and took nothing with him, save it were his family, and provisions, and tents, and departed into the wilderness. So he had to choose what was the most important thing that he needed to navigate that wilderness. So what do we need to navigate our personal wilderness? We all have different circumstances. Each of us, right? It's just amazing how different all of our lives are. So those things that are essential provisions will be different for each one of us, but we need to be able to evaluate what those are. And it can feel devastating. I have grieved the loss of a lot of my professional work because I love it so much. It'll be there when I'm ready to go back to it. But we have to be willing to look at that.
For just a second, I love that you bring up that grief. I think women don't recognize that may be a feeling that they're feeling. I've talked to different ages of women. A woman I just talked to the other day, she's like, okay, love my husband, but he's home all the time now and drives me crazy, right?
Exactly.
And so it's not that people don't love their spouse or their children, but the dynamics have shifted. And in such a stop in the middle of the road way, a brake check kind of feel, that all of a sudden we're thrown into this. And it is a natural emotion to feel, right? To grieve what you thought was going to be. A lot of these kids with not having prom, not having graduations from college, all of these things. Grieving this, what are some suggestions you have for grieving together as a family? Being able to validate that, being able to own that feeling so that they can move through it and move beyond it to get something better.
I think the first thing, especially with our children, is to invite the conversation. Ask them the questions. How are you doing today? How are you feeling? Or I'll start with a statement to my teenage daughter who lost a state debate championship and a couple of other things all within about a week's time. Said, I'm sorry that you lost your debate championship, and allow her then to respond. And to let them know, we understand this is a hard thing and it's important to us because we know it's important to you. It's very easy sometimes as moms, right? If our kids they bump themselves and they come in screaming, it's bloody murder. And it's easy for us to kind of go roll our eyes and go, okay, more drama, right? And yet to validate and say, I am so sorry because I know this is hard for you. Even if we don't think it would be hard for us, to validate and say, from this little 7-year-old's perspective, or this 8-year-old, or this 9-year-old, or this 15-year-old, or this 16-year-old. Those are my 5. What is important to them? And I can validate that that's their whole world. It's so important to them. Invite the conversations and then put a pause on our mouths and listen to what they have to say. I think you can't go wrong with that, Connie.
Oh my goodness, you are so right. I wish I would have had this like a month ago, because I even got to a place where my kids complained to me that I was too positive. I was like, what? And they said, you're too positive. And it made me so frustrated. They said, you give too much and you do too much for others. You serve too much. And I was like, what? And then because I stepped back, thank goodness, in this one experience, I thought, what are they saying to me? Because that doesn't make sense to me. What are they really trying to say? And that's what they were trying to say. My one daughter was saying, I don't need you to give me a 1 for the Gipper speech. Like, it's all going to be okay. Yeah. I need to just express my frustration and my sadness and know that that's okay. I can just feel it and I'll move through it.
Right. To hear someone, to love them, to value them without judgment. Those are some thoughts that Brene Brown often talks about. That we can offer that to our children, we can offer that to a partner, and that's gonna be our best thing that we can do.
I love that. And that is so pivotal, to even allow ourselves as the mothers and the wives and the sisters and the aunts, and we're the ones, as you mentioned, with the suddenly becoming teacher and cook and cleaner and chore director in a way that we haven't done before, because we had our segments and our compartments. Mm-hmm. And in a beautiful way, now we're all in this mess, the middle of the mess together, and figuring this out and really seeing each other's personalities more up close and not just carpooling to everywhere. So I think this allowing for this space, and I love your concept of open the dialogue, of not being afraid of that dialogue. I think sometimes women that I've talked to in this situation, that I talk to a lot because I do my programs online, they're afraid that they won't have the energy or ability to deal with everybody's emotions if they open up a dialogue. But what I have found is if we have certain times and places, we know at night, before we go to bed, we're going to do prayer and scripture, and that's a time for anyone to open up something they need to talk about, or that I can throw something out and we can open that up, and it's a good space. But we've also had to set some boundaries where I've said, okay, ranting, I cannot have 3 children ranting every day. So you get 10 minutes. You get 10 minutes to do your rant, and then I need you to use your coping skills, right? Yeah. So I love that you give this suggestion of open the dialogue, allow the emotion and response, validate it, pause and listen and validate, and then possibly just add that boundary of, okay, now what are we going to do to move forward? So what would you recommend with that? I know you have some thoughts and feelings of how we can move ourselves and our families through now we've kind of gotten down to the nubs and what matters most to us. How do we move through this experience and still stay upbeat, or still be positive and encouraging with each other when we don't know how long it's going to last?
Right. I think that's a really important idea. I was really unhappy when those kids came home from canceled school, because I needed my space, and now I didn't have the option to have my space. The balance I had created was now gone. I could continue to resist that and be unwilling to accept that, and that would continue to cause me more emotional grief. I needed to open myself up to accept the reality of the circumstance at the time, and recognize that although it's not ideal, it is what it is, and we need to now try to problem solve our way through it. I mentioned I've been reading a lot of Neil A. Maxwell books. There's a quote here from one of his books that I really like. And he says this: seemingly sad circumstances may actually reflect implementation, not disintegration. Indeed, the unfolding of God's purposes may require the collapse of other things. So as you ask, how do we move forward and try to maintain some positivity? I think we try to maintain a long-term, maybe even an eternal perspective that says God has an ultimate plan, and how he's choosing to get me where he wants me to be isn't necessarily the way I think he's going to get me there. I might have a vision of what I think my life is supposed to be, and God's like, no, actually, that wasn't even close to what I had planned. And so if I can recognize with health issues, financial issues, job issues, which are all prevalent with COVID-19, that what appears to be a failure, right, or disintegration or trials can actually be that movement forward. So it can be the first step to getting us really where we do need to focus on those essential elements. And that can put us in that positive mind frame saying, well, maybe I was kind of off track. Maybe I was putting too much energy into these other things. And okay, it kind of happened when I wasn't planning on it, and I was kind of compelled to have to make this change, but I can choose to embrace it.
I love that. And don't we find in life when we say to ourselves, I want this outcome, and then we have our A plus B equals C mentality, but it's actually a calculus equation, right?
Right.
And I love that quote where he says, indeed, the unfolding of God's purposes may require the collapse of other things.
Yes.
Love that. Because haven't we all felt that as I'm talking to women, they're like, the sports have been pulled, the extracurricular activities have been pulled. My sacred spots of places I can go to for my refuge have been pulled. Like all of these things have been taken, just taken. But then as we go deeper into that, what is the thing that each of these women want? They want more time with their family. They want more meaningful connection with their family. They want to be able to see each other and hear each other. But the way we were going about it may not have been the best way of just the, I call it pinball living. You started the stop of the day,
Oh, yeah.
and it's ortho, dentist, groceries, blah, 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 sports, And instead, I've noticed, at least in our home for sure, that we're seeing each other more and hearing each other more, and we're needing to work through some things more that could have been just thrown under the rug because it just was so busy in day-to-day living. So I love that the collapse of these things that we kind of relied on or have been our go-to are now taken so that we can see things in bold relief. And I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful that we have this choice in this moment that may not ever exist exactly like this again, that we can be intentional about what we want to have our lives look like, our family look like, what activities we actually choose. And I love the point that you made. We may have to revisit those things that may not have been wrong in what we were doing, but in this situation now, they do not fit the same way.
Right.
We need to adjust.
Psychologically, there's a principle called radical acceptance. And I alluded to acceptance, the same kind of thing. It's the acceptance of what is in the present now, whether we like it or not. But a feature of acceptance that a lot of people don't realize is it doesn't mean you can't work to improve things or change your circumstance, but it means you have to accept where you are at your starting point. If you don't accept where you are, how do you move beyond that, right? If you're just in denial and kind of ignoring, we'll throw it under the rug, it's no big deal. So if we can accept this is where we are, it's not ideal, right? I mean, everyone's home. We're cooking more food. We're doing more dishes, right? We're in the kitchen all day. So it's not ideal, but we can accept it and embrace it and say, okay, now with where we are now, what do we need to do to try to capitalize on these most essential elements? And I think this is where we need to be very diligent in trying to maintain that connection to the divine. We need to seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit. We need to listen to promptings. We need to pray. Joy D. Jones spoke in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Conference in April 2020. She said, women wear many hats, but it is impossible and unnecessary to wear them all at once. The Spirit helps us determine which work to focus on today. So it's not just impossible, but we should still try to do it. She says, and it's unnecessary. So we need to do the spiritual work to become sensitive to what is it that I need to attend to at this time.
I love that. In validating, especially for women, to take that time. I know that I have had to rework my schedule and say, okay, before my little guy gets up, I have a 7-year-old. So before he gets up, before anybody gets up, I need to have that prayer and scripture time for myself. Because if I don't have it, usually I can either have it in the morning or when they've gone to school right after they leave for school, so I can have as much time as I want. And now it's imperative that I have that connection first thing. So I think women can allow themselves the ability to say, I need to rework this. And this isn't, I don't have to apologize for it to my family, that we all need to rework this schedule. And I think this is where the family buy-in comes in. I know that even like you mentioned, women are ending up in the kitchen all day and it's driving them nuts. and being able to set those healthy boundaries as a family and say, guys, we're not going to make it if we're all in the kitchen on top of each other all day long. So how are we going to work this? I had to do this with my family, and I come to find out they would rather that we do breakfast and lunch on our own and then definitely do dinner. Now, most of us are together for breakfast. I like bookends. I like to see each other in the morning and see each other in the evening. But one child that does not work for, she's needed extra sleep, but the other ones need to get going on their work. So we've just had to be flexible. And I think
Exactly.
you brought up that word, and I think it's such a powerful word, allowing ourselves flexibility. So do you have any tips for women to have this? I call it structured flexibility. We have to have some structure, and we have to be flexible about how we go about it. But any suggestions, especially for women, and especially if they are mothers, what would help them to be able to create this new rhythm, routine, family dynamic that they're being able to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not in the midst of this storm every day?
Yeah, I think we identify the things that are most essential that need to be in that routine, and maybe create a rough schedule about where in the routine they need to be. And yet we need to be flexible and not tie ourselves to the clock. So as someone who did a master's degree and a PhD, I'm a total nerd. I value schoolwork, and I've always worked hard at it. So I expect that of my children. So all of a sudden, when my 5 children were home and I was now teacher, all of a sudden their schoolwork became the most important thing to me that I had to get done. And I was feeling very burdened by that because my health was not good. And one of the things that helps my health is just daily exercise. I always feel better, even though I don't still feel like perfect. I always feel better on the days I exercise. And I stopped exercising because I felt like I had to get their schoolwork done in the morning, because otherwise it would be too hard to manage them later in the day, and I didn't want to have to manage them all day. All of a sudden, my needs were not being met, and I was feeling worse physically because I wasn't getting my exercise. So yes, I would start them on their schoolwork in the morning, but now I'm saying once they get started, I'm taking myself out of the equation for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and I'm just kind of letting them free flow. And if they end up playing too many games online or whatever, fine. And then when I'm done exercising, I come back and see where they are and get them back on track. I'm feeling a ton better about our schedule because my needs are still getting met. So yes, we have to get these things done, but they don't always have to get done in the way that we think initially they have to be done. And I think in this time of COVID-19, tying ourselves to the clock and saying, okay, 12 o'clock is this, 12:15 is this, I don't think that's the right approach right now. I think we have to let go some of those concerns about structures and to-do lists and focus more on the, why is this an essential element we've kept? What's important about this? And if my interaction with my child is the most important thing, but I'm getting irritated and frustrated because they're not getting their schoolwork done, I'm going to be damaging that relationship. So I need to prioritize the relationship piece, knowing the schoolwork will come along.
Absolutely.
So the scripture story in the New Testament about Mary and Martha listening to Jesus, and Martha was cumbered by the tasks, but Mary took the time to sit at the feet of the Savior. I think that's an important strategy, to say limit the Martha-like anxieties of I got to do this, 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 and this right now, da 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 da, and say right now I'm going to sit and I'm going to read to my child, or I'm going to let them read to me. Right now I'm going to sit and talk to my teen who's missing her friends. I think those are important ideas.
Oh, that is beautiful. And in fact, that is exactly what I finally came to with my kids' schedules as well, where I asked I got the buy-in. And I think this is a thread that we're talking about today that I see woven through the points that we're making, which is it's a family deal now. It's not mom just directing and point and shoot. It's, hey, we've got this problem. How do we want to solve this? I talked with my 7-year-old. I said, he was having meltdowns, and I was like, what's going on? And it was the change and everything. It was too much for him to be bop, 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 bop. And so I said, well, how would it work best? Do you want to take a break after you do? And he gets 10 slides, a day. And so he would do 2 slides and then he'd take a 15-minute break.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't check the clock for 15 minutes, like you're saying, just this ebb and flow. But the interesting thing to me is that the more that we have pulled back and we've let go of pre-COVID scheduling and gone with the COVID scheduling now, which is we don't really look a lot at the clock and we really just go with this feel of the day. we literally have had time, energy, and interest in doing other things together. We just planted a garden yesterday. You could
Awesome.
not have made me do that for all the team in China. I really could not. I mean, we tried it 3 years in a row, years ago, and I'm like, never again. But one thing led to another, and my daughter and I were saying, isn't it funny that had COVID not happened, we would never have done that. And yet, guess what we're doing as a family? We're out checking the plants, and it's just so fun, and we're being more relaxed. We're savoring life. We're baking. We're, like you said, we're doing things together and not on this go-to schedule. We're being more in flow with life rather than having to create all these compartments. So I love what you're saying. Be able to, with those hats, choosing a few key hats for yourself and as a family, and then saying, okay, these are the pieces that the key pieces we're going to put in first, and then we're going to work around those in the way that we need to. I love it.
Exactly. I think you'll appreciate a phrase that I heard in my bachelor's degree, just one of the professors talking about relationships and families. And he said, the purpose of the task is to strengthen the relationship. So you think about, especially as we're parenting these younger kids, it can be very frustrating. We can get very irritated as we're trying to teach them to read or teach them to how to clean the bathroom or whatever, and they're not doing it right, and they're whining and they're this and they're that. If the purpose in our mind is to get the dishes done or to get the laundry folded or the kitchen clean or whatever, we will be frustrated and annoyed and irritated with our children. But if in our mind, the purpose for doing it with our child is to strengthen that relationship with them, we will teach them, we will connect with them, we'll be slower with them and more accepting with them. It might take 3 times longer to get the dishes done, but it wasn't the purpose anyway, right? We as moms can always just go and throw the dishes in the dishwasher in 5 minutes. We're the fastest ones, right? But if we think during this COVID-19 time, the purpose of the task is to strengthen the relationship, and then you've only chosen tasks that you feel essential anyway, you're going to be more motivated, by the way, to connect with them because of those essential times. So I think it all comes together.
I love that. Ladies, I hope you have gotten as much out of this as I have. This softer, gentler feel to ourselves and our lives, and being able to have the unexpected blessing of this COVID quarantine and lifestyle, that we can really cherry pick those goodies that will help us and our families to be able to enjoy this life. A few quick recaps where she said, hit the pause button, and then the structured flexibility, just being able to have some structure, but being flexible in our approach to grieve the loss and invite the dialogue, open the dialogue for ourselves and our families, and allow the emotion to be able to come out so we can just wash it over us and then move through it. And then radical acceptance, just accepting what is, not fighting it, but just accept it for what is as a starting point to move forward. And then I love that the purpose of the task is to strengthen relationships, that whatever we're doing during this COVID time, that it is first and foremost to strengthen the relationships with those we love. And then the actual doing is just a bonus.
And just one more thought also. For those times we do mess up and we do get irritated with our kids and we raise our voice, to offer ourselves grace and allow ourselves to start over again.
I love that. And use paper plates, right?
Exactly.
We just got to do this.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Deborah. If people want to reach you or get more of what you do, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
I have a website, DebraMcClendon.com, but the best way to get a lot of the insights and things that I've studied and pondered all of these years is the book that my husband and I have put together. We spent 5 years on this. There's a lot of substance here. It's 400 pages, so be ready. Commitment to the covenant, strengthening the me, we, and thee of marriage. It is angled towards married couples. However, anybody who even wants to be married, is dating, college roommates, anybody who has any kind of relationships with coworkers, you're going to find useful content in there for any kind of relationship.
Fantastic. Available on Amazon and able to get as you desire the content that I have gotten from Deborah, and that's why I invited her on here. It has always been stunningly appropriate and pragmatic. And I love it. It's easy to apply into my life. And so I highly encourage you to get that book and get the gems out of that. Don't have to read it straight through. You can take the gems in the chapters as you need.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us, Deborah. It's been
You're welcome, Connie.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sweetie. And if you want more of this great stuff, you can subscribe, rate, and review. You can get more at conniesokol.com. We have those great free downloads for you of Step Into Your Purpose, Find Your Purpose, those challenges, those free downloads. Go to conniesokol.com for all of the blog posts, podcasts, TV segments, and everything that you need to find and fulfill your purpose and get started on it today. Thanks so much for joining us, and join us for the next one.
Thank you.